Hello, and welcome to my Essential 15 project. I'm Lawrence Link, and sit back and prepare to learn. Starting right along with the five people, I have Malcolm Little, also known as Malcolm X. He was an important figure in the Black Muslim movement. He differed greatly from Martin Luther King Jr., as he preferred a more segregation-like state. He thought that blacks and whites would live better separated from each other, but both having equal services, education, etc., etc. Next, I have John Fitzgerald Kennedy, or JFK. He was the President of the United States from 1960 to 1963. He laid the groundwork for the Civil Rights Movement and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. He was assassinated in 1963 by Lee Harvey Oswald. Next, number 3, I have James Meredith. He was admitted into the University of Mississippi. He was the first black student to be admitted, and JFK had to send in federal marshals to protect him from angry whites. Next, I have Jesse Jackson. He was a good friend of King's and was part of, I believe, the SCLC. And he differed from King because he thought a violent approach would be better. So they differ quite a bit, but he was with King the night he was assassinated and was on the balcony above him while King was out smoking. And supposedly King died in his arms. Finally, for the people, I have my favorite, Harry Belafonte, one of my favorite musicians, the King of Calypso. When he was a child, he was sent to live with his mother's family in the Bahamas and saw how the blacks were treated by the British at the time. When he came back to America, he was part of many protests, was very much active in the civil rights movement, and became famous. For my first event, I have Executive Order 9981, which took effect July 26, 1948. This was the executive order that made by Harry S. Truman that desegregated all military forces. Next, I have the Freedom Rides, started May 4th, 1961. They were seeing if the desegregation on interstate bus travel was going to be enforced in the southern states. It was not. In certain places they were stoned. In one place the bus was lit on fire. In other places they were chased out. Others were arrested for trespassing. It was just a whole big deal. Next one I don't have a picture for since I already covered the person. Is James Meredith enrolls in college October 1st, 1962. He is the first black student to enroll in the University of Mississippi, as stated previously. Next, I have the 24th Amendment, which was passed on January 23rd, 1964. It got rid of the voting taxes and the tests that prevented African Americans from voting in the past. For my last event, I have President Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It ended segregation, outlawed discrimination, and was the single biggest event in the entire civil rights movement. Next, I have Little Rock, Arkansas, which is the location for the Little Rock Nine, and because of the Little Rock Nine, it became a large place for the civil rights movement because they were some of the first students to be enrolled in that high school that were black. And that was another big step after Brown versus Board of Education. Next up, I have Birmingham, Alabama, location of many, many civil rights events, such as the explosion of a church which killed several young children, the bus boycotts, and others. And then demonstrations led by Martin Luther King Jr. Next, I have Memphis, Tennessee. This is the city where Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. He was assassinated outside of this motel in the picture. This is the very scene, the very room, all right here. Next, I have Selma, Alabama. This is the location of Bloody Sunday, which is where a march on Washington was halted by police and state troopers. The troopers launched tear gas and were beating the blacks that tried to cross the bridge. It was a horrible, horrible event. Next, I have Atlanta, Georgia, where Martin Luther King Jr. lived and where the SCLC was founded. This is one of the big locations because this is where King lived. This was his home parish since he was a big preacher, and that's what started his whole thing, at least in my opinion. That's his church right in the picture. Thank you for being attentive, I hope. That's my goal anyway, to my presentation. This is the end. I hope you've enjoyed. Goodbye.